Hello, Pitch Warriors, and welcome to another amazing live show. Tonight we have some really cool middle grade mentors that I know you're very excited to meet. I'm Nikki, your host, but tonight's about them, so we're going to start off with CV for introductions.
Hi, I'm CB, and my co-mentor is Shauna Holyoke, and I write contemporary fantasy and adventure, and she writes this contemporary adventure. My agent is Susie Townsend at New Leaf Literary, and Shauna her debut is spring of 2018, and it's called My Paper Route and Other Deadly Things. And we are really excited for friendships, stories, anything with STEM, friends, enemies to friends, that kind of stuff.
Oops, sorry. Is it my turn? Yeah. Sorry, you there. All right, I'm Gail in the Hi from Manila. And this is Sunday. I kind of caved from the Twitter pressure that you all want to see him here, so he's here. And I'm represented by Alyssa Henkin of Trident Media Group. And I'm co-mentoring with one of my writing BFFs. It's Isabel Adrid. She can't be here right now, but she's totally fine being represented by Sunday here. Sorry, speaking out. Anyway, we're really looking for marginalized main characters. And we're not very particular about genre except for our do not wants, which is horror. We're actually easily freaked out, and high fantasy. Other than that, we're pretty much open to most genres, especially contemporary. We had contemporary and magic. So that's me.
Hello, I'm Jilliana Brandt, and I'm represented by Natalie Lacosel of the Bradford Literary Agency. And my co-mentor this year is Allison Ziegler, and she is represented by Emmanuel Morgan of Stone Song Literary. And we both write mainly fantasy, high fantasy, and contemporary with some light fantasy elements. And all of the horror that you are not sending to Gail, please send to us. We love darker elements in fantasy, horror, creepy, scary things. We love that high tension and really fantastical monsters, and any kind of fantasy, please send it to us.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jessica Vitalis, and I am represented by Saba Solomon at Talcott Notch. I am here tonight representing Team Unicorn Mojo, and I'm co-mentoring this year with my friend, critique partner, and professional editor, Julie Arts, who decided to join us tonight via Unicorn. So Julie and I are looking for both contemporary and fantasy. We're interested in multicultural stories. We'd love to see own voices. We love retellings and anything with a touch of magic. So check out our wish list, and if your story matches, please send it our way.
Hi, my name is Nick. I'm represented by Kate Testerman of KT Literary. My first novel was Steering Toward Normal. Well, it still is. And my upcoming novel is Boy Bites Bug, which is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. And I had a lot of fun taste testing insects for the book's research. I do not look for epistolary or novels in verse, and not high fantasy per se, although I do love a good dragon story. And then after that, pretty much anything is of interest to me. So thanks.
Hi, I'm Tara Creole. I am represented by Samantha Biggood of Samantha B. Literary, and I am co-mentoring this year with Jenna Lean, and she's represented by Gina Panettiere of Talcott Notch. And we both write contemporary, like horror, mystery, and we love magical elements, and we are looking for those exact same things in our subs. So if you write mystery or horror or any contemporary with magical elements, we would love to see it.
Hi, my name is Wade Elbert White. This is my third year as a mentor in Pitch Wars, and my second year as a co-mentor with Tamanda Words. We are, as it happens, both represented by Elizabeth Kaplan of the Elizabeth Kaplan Literary Agency. And we are both fantasy and science fiction writers. I would say kind of primarily fantasy. And our interests lean towards that, although having said that, last year we picked a time-traveling, multi-dimensional science fiction story to mentor. So you can definitely capture us with humor, and dragons and or robots are always welcome.
Awesome. As you guys can see, these mentors are super awesome, and they really want to answer your questions. So if you're watching and you have a question you would like asked live, please head over to Twitter and do #AskMentor, and our amazing Twitter captain tonight, Lee Marr, is shooting them over. And one of the questions that's been on the feed even earlier today, a lot of people have been asking about the parameters of age for middle grade. And we were talking about it before the show, and some people had thoughts on, you know, age 11, is it upper or middle, or 13, is that still middle grade? CB, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, so my manuscript that I had written, which was a retelling of Treasure Island, had the main character 13 years old. And what I have found out is that certain places like Barnes & Noble don't really know where to put 13-year-old middle grade. They feel like it's a little bit of a dead zone, 13 to 15 right now, both with upper MG and lower YA. And so I'm actually having to revise and age it down to 12. And so I feel like right now, just from my own experiences, 12 and 11 and maybe even 10 qualify as upper MG, and maybe, I don't know, 8 to 10 would be the lower. I don't know if that is for everybody, but just, you know, from the feedback that I've gotten, that's where I can say it seems to be right now.
I'll add that my first book, Steering Toward Normal, has protagonists who are 13 and turn 14 during the course of the novel. It is sold as upper middle grade. Having said that, like CB said, Barnes & Noble shelved it under teen. That didn't mean it wasn't in the bookstore. It just, different stores shelved it in different ways. I think, as other people have said on the feed, it really depends on the content. So 12-year-old is typically straight up middle grade. 10 and 11 can age up depending on the content, and 13, 14 can age down depending on the content as well. I just read one that has a 14-year-old middle grade, 14-year-old protagonist, which is definitely straight middle grade, probably even a little low. So it really depends on the content. But having said that, my book was shelved in different places in different bookstores. So.
I would just jump in and add that. Oh, sorry, Juliana, go ahead. You're in front of me.
Oh, you're fine. Just quickly, because Joy McCullough has an amazing video on this that does a breakdown, but she gives an example in a middle grade, a young adult, and an adult novel, all with 13-year-old protagonists, and really highlighting how important voice is and how a 13-year-old voice for a middle grade book is going to be far different than young adults or adults. So that's a really good video to watch too.
And just to follow up on that point, I think for the purposes of pitch wars, probably, can everybody hear me? Yeah, okay. For the purposes of pitch wars, I wouldn't worry too much about what to label it. If you're submitting to middle grade, just work on the voice and the age of your character, because your mentor is going to help you figure out how to position it. And then once you get an agent, they're going to help figure out how to sell it. And ultimately, it will be the editor's decision. So work on your writing and stay focused on the story, and don't worry so much about the marketing at this point.
Yeah, adding to that, actually, voice plays a lot of role as well. So actually, in my experience, my agent, originally my main character is aged 12, but when she read it and she had it read by other people, my main character actually sounded 10 or 11. So it kind of has something to do with voice as well. So it's something to think about when you're aging your protagonists. And yeah, I have to agree, you don't really need to be fussed if it's upper or lower middle grade. And with pitch wars, it can help you get your book there where it's supposed to be. So don't stress too much. I can see people stressing too much on the hashtag, asking so many questions. It's okay to ask, but don't worry, guys. We're gonna help you. That's why we're here. So don't worry too much. We're not gonna bite. Probably this little guy here might, but we won't. Yeah, see him. Anyway, sorry.
No, I love that. Yeah, we're definitely not going to bite. And so bring those questions on. But yeah, be nice to yourselves. You guys don't have to stress out over everything. Our next question is from Dana Kramaroff. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. But she asked a great question, which is, what is your favorite form of communication to use with your future mentee? And let's all answer that question, and we'll start with Tara.
Okay. Hi, Dana. So I really I think email is the quickest way for me. I can't always get on the phone, and I know my co-mentors the same way. We have little kids running around, and it's not always the most efficient way. But I do, especially after a developmental edit, the first round of edits, I like to do a Skype session for at least an hour and talk through like the big picture things, because sometimes that's the best way to brainstorm and get through things. So I'm open to things like that as well. And yeah.
I assume I'm next. Probably email for both Tamanda and I. That's pretty much the way we ran it last year, kind of the same with Tara. I've got 3 kids at home. Tamanda works full-time as a teacher. Just in terms of coordinating schedules and all of that sort of thing, just email is absolutely the fastest way to get us. And I can only speak for myself. I tend to be a bit of a slow thinker, so I need time to, when somebody asks me a question, I need time to kind of put my thoughts together. And so Skype ends up being a waste of time just because I take so long to figure out what it is I'm going to say. So email's probably better in the end for both of us.
This is Shauna and I's first time mentoring, so I don't have something that worked for us in the past, but I know that we're always down for email, and if you need to reach out to us on Skype, then I'm pretty certain that we'd be able to do that, or a phone call if you're having some kind of nervous moment where you would prefer just talking and hearing someone's voice. But yeah, we're always around. She has 6 kids and I have 3, so we're just like you guys, you know, things can be hectic, but we'll always be around to be reached some way.
Oh, sorry. Preferably email, but Isabella and I are perfectly fine with DM. We actually have our mentees in other mentor match, and sometimes they reach out via email, sometimes via DM. It really depends on you, which one you prefer. We're easily adjustable. And one of the things, I know that I live in Manila, but Isabel lives in Manila as well most of the year. But she's asleep in the morning and the afternoon. She's actually up in the evening most times. So you don't have to worry about it. Kind of have us 24/7. So there's that. So, but I prefer email so I can, like, you know, gather my thoughts and then reply to you better. So there.
So Allison and I are both open to any kind of communication. I know we really want to be able to provide like a united, cohesive front, so you're not receiving like 2 sets of feedback or responses to emails. Or so, you know, part of me thinks that emailing is better, just, or would be better for you, just because then you're receiving one email or one response back rather than calling one of us or calling the other. But we both love the phone. We love talking on the phone and texting, and I live on GChat, as my writer friends know, so you can always contact me on chat too. But I know, and I have to say, I know that a lot of people have phone anxiety and like getting on Skype anxiety, and and I know all of the other mentors here are totally understanding of that. So please do not feel like we're going to make you get on the phone and talk with us. If you do not want to, we are 100% fine with just like internet communication too. So we're open to anything.
Yep, more of the same here. In the past, I've communicated with my mentees exclusively via email. I think with Julie co-mentoring, we would be open to Google Hangouts. We've been doing that together to prepare for Pitch Wars, and that's been a lot of fun. So I could envision doing a session or two of that to get to know you, and then maybe brainstorming. But basically, we're flexible. We're going to do whatever is the most comfortable for you and what meets your needs. And as long as it works with all of our schedules, we're up for it. So we can't wait.
The same for me, although I really do like to be on Skype, not as I work from home and I live alone, and it's always nice to have someone who has to talk to me. But also because I do tend to be something of an extroverted thinker, and so I do a lot of good brainstorming in dialogue with people. I'm perfectly happy to communicate via email. That's totally fine if you do have some kind of nervousness about speaking in person, but I won't bite, unlike the unicorn horse team. And, no, I don't think the unicorns will bite you. They'll just stab you with their magical horns. So I do like to talk, but I'm happy to email. I always do follow up a conversation with an email just to be sure that we both were saying the same things we thought each person was saying, and just to kind of have that rundown to go back for, so you don't have to take 1,000 notes and you can just talk with me.
Can I just say, I mean, lots of people ask about how we fight behind the scenes as mentors, and you heard it here first. Middle grade mentors fight with magical unicorns. So, next question is from Araminti. Have any of you mentored a pair of writing partners? Any tips on navigating the process ×2? Has anyone had the opportunity to do that? No? Rebecca, you have?
I haven't mentored a team, but I am co-writing a novel with a good friend of mine. And as good of friends as we are, communication is that much more important, because she is 2 hours time difference. So a lot of times I'll be writing in the script and then she'll write it into it later, but won't know what was in my head for some reason. And so it's really just about communication, which I think that as a co-writing team, you probably will have already figured out how to navigate. So yeah, I don't know that answers the question, but I have a little bit of experience with it.
So not as an official mentee, I had two wonderful authors who submitted to me last year, but their manuscript needed a lot more work than what 2 months would. And I hope if they're like watching that they're not minding me like shouting out about them now, but awesome book that they had. So it was two guys who are writing this book together, but for communication, they actually, and I've worked with them for the past year on their book, but one of the authors was the person who I always email and communicate with. He just takes the lead, and we go back and forth on things. So I think that's a great point, going back to what Rebecca said about them. They've already figured out what their communication and how they work together. They already know how that is, and coming and working with me on it. So that's a little bit different, but a different take on it.
I also haven't mentored anyone, but I co-wrote a YA book with my daughter. And so I have experience with co-writing, and I have a co-mentor. So we would be open to making it a foursome. But yeah, so I don't have the mentoring aspect of it, but I definitely know what it's like to write with somebody, and just the different situations that you can run into, either making things work well or butting heads with a certain area and how to work around that.
Cool. So I'm going to combine two questions here that we've gotten from the Ask Mentor feed, which if you're watching, make sure you send us your questions. And the ones you've asked so far, guys, are awesome. So first, it's from Nicole and Hoofs. Do you have a POV preference? And then JB Mills asked, what are some MG voice no-nos that are immediate red flags? And I thought, why don't we just take a moment to all talk about voice and POV, and we can go down the line, starting with Jessica.
Okay, first question, do I have a POV preference? I definitely don't. I have written in both first and third, so I'm completely comfortable with both of them. I think the biggest flag for me is if you're writing in first person, overuse of the I, the sentence structure can get very, very repetitive, and oftentimes authors don't even know that they're doing that. So that's a huge, huge red flag for me.
For me, either voice, either point of view works. I tend to write in third person myself because I feel like it gives me a little bit of wiggle room to articulate feelings that a middle grader might not be able to articulate in an I voice. And it really varies by book. My books tend to have a fairly intense heartline, and so there are things that an I voice just wouldn't say, but that the characters can express through metaphor or description of place or things like that. And I feel like third person gives me just that little bit of space to keep the voice feeling authentic, but still be able to say things that the character wouldn't actually ever say out loud. Especially with boy point of view characters, like in Boy Bites Bug, these in particular, you know, they express themselves through humor and through wrestling and monkeying around. They're never going to say "I love you, man," even when they do. So, so third person, I think, just gives me a little bit of extra space.
Same for me and Jenna over here. We don't mind first or third. I tend to write more in first because that's where I find my middle grade voice. So I think it just depends on, you know, where your voice shines. I think some people write better in third and some people write better in first. So I mean, wherever you particularly find your niche, I think that's where you should write. As far as voice no-nos, something I find myself catching a lot when I'm editing manuscripts is slipping into the adult voice, especially for middle grade. I mean, usually, we're adults writing middle grade, and you'll put a thought in or a dialogue or a sentence, and I'm constantly saying, oh, adult voice here, adult voice here. So that would be my no-no, but that's an easy fix. So if you have that, it's okay. That's what we're here for.
I'm good either way. I write primarily third person, and I believe Tamanda does as well. I haven't read everything that she's written. I'm fine with first person. Somebody else can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's probably true to say that more middle grade is written in third person than first, whereas once you shift to YA, you might find a higher frequency of first person. And somebody with a little more knowledge might be able to correct me on that. As far as red flags, to mention one that hasn't come up yet, I would say probably the biggest one for me is writing down to the age group. There may be a group that lacks some experience. They're only so old, but I still find them a pretty sophisticated group. And what do I mean by writing down? Like trying to write in a kid's voice or a children's voice. It ends up, people think they're writing middle grade, and it ends up sounding like you're writing a 6-year-old rather than a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old. So in the same way that you don't want to go into too much of an adult voice, like Tara said, I think you want to be careful that you're not writing what you think it's not a kiddie voice kind of age range. You should still be writing, you know, a solid character with a definite personality and point of view. And keep in mind that middle grade readers are reading some pretty engaging and complex stuff. That would be my 2 cents.
I am down for both third and first. My middle grade is third, Shauna's is first, and we both write opposite as well. So we're cool with either. I guess my pet peeve, one that hasn't been mentioned, is when the story is full of passive voice. If I'm to like the third chapter and there's 400 hases and wases and or hads and that, then that just pulls me further out of the story. So that would be my no-no, as well as, you know, if you're in third, if you can get rid of the she's or the he, you know, and just sort of set up your sentence so you're more in their head or their action as opposed to reading she did this, you know, just rearrange the words a little bit and make it a more active sentence that brings you closer into their viewpoint. So those would be my no-nos.
Yeah, personally, I don't have a preference between first POV and third POV, although I really don't like the third person omniscient. It's just, I don't know, it just separates me too much from the voice. I kind of find it hard to get into the story if it's like, you know, it's like talking over the whole thing, like the narrator kind of thing. But I think one of the pet peeves, it's not exactly the pet peeve I have. It's yeah, like Tara, it's the adult voice. Sometimes it kind of sneaks into the, you know, into the middle grade story. But one thing that I can, one thing that I usually do personally for myself, for my own writing, is that I use this Hemingway app. Anybody heard of that? It's actually an online app where you can paste like a chapter or two, and then it calculates more or less on the complexity of your sentence structure. So if you're using like too long sentences, it's going to like rate your writing with a higher grade. So more or less, you're gonna have an idea if you're like falling into the adult too complex words or sentences, and it also kind of gives you an idea if you're like Wade said, if you're being too kiddie. So that's a good. That's one of the tools I kind of use. It's a Hemingway app. Can Google. So, but I think you can find it at HemingwayApp.com. So it's free, so you can try it out. Man, you know, doesn't hurt to try. Don't necessarily have to purchase anything, and it's just one of those writing tools in your arsenal that you can use. Yeah.
So long ago, I used to write young adult, and in young adult, I wrote in first person, but all of my middle grade work has always been in third person, and I love writing in third person. I know that Allison writes in a beautiful first person, so she has a lot more experience with that. And I feel like, I think it was Tara who said it, that first person gives you like a closer look at emotions and deeper emotions. In middle grade, you have a little bit more of a distance from emotions. And I kind of like that for middle grade. And kind of going back, well, I think this is also what Tara said too, about pet peeves in voice. Is almost an over-analysis of those emotions that kids have. Where a lot of times when you read middle grade works, you will understand, and as an adult, you'll have more of a clear understanding of what a kid is feeling and why they're feeling that way. But the kid isn't, or the character isn't going into depth and analyzing themselves and making connections. They just don't do that, and they don't need to. And that's hard to write. So I think that's something that's important to keep in mind when you're writing the middle grade voice.
While we're on the topic of, you know, writing in middle grade specifically, we have a question from Jeanette Lee. What are your thoughts on showing adults with mild swearing, drinking alcohol, or other adult activities? Does anyone want to touch on this? Tara.
So just from my experience working with my small publisher, it's not unheard of, but if you want to get librarian approval and things like that, you don't really want vulgarity and things like that in middle grade as far as like too much swearing or sexual content. But I mean, you can have alcoholic parents, or you can have those characters, but in my experience, we've taken out swear words because they've asked us to. We've taken out, anything very specific. You can have vague descriptions, but I mean, that's just from my experience.
In my debut novel, Steering Toward Normal, the inciting incident is that an alcoholic father has thrown his middle grade son out at another person's house after his wife died, or after the father's wife died. And so alcoholism plays a very real and intense role in that book. There was some cursing, and like Tara said, I was instructed to take those out, those words out. And I've seen books just cheat and have the character say, I swore, or he swore, rather than say the actual swear word. But that is also why it was an upper MG as opposed to a straight up middle grade. Now, that doesn't mean I haven't seen 10, 11-year-old main characters dealing with intense issues like drug abuse in the household and other issues like that. But I know for me personally, that is absolutely what aged up the book, and why the characters needed to be aged up as well, because they needed the coping skills to be able to deal with that.
I'll just add to those comments by saying I had a little bit of language in my first book when I was looking for an agent. I found my agent just fine without it. She didn't ask me to take it out. Once I get to the publisher, they did ask me to take it out. So I would say, if you feel like it's appropriate for the novel, it's probably not going to interfere with your search for an agent. Once you get to a publisher and somebody's actually paying you money, depending on the publishing house, they may ask you to take it out. Something to think about beforehand. If I saw some in the manuscript of a mentee, I would definitely point it out. Just say, this is something you want to decide beforehand. Is this a make or break thing? Like, does this have to be there for you? For me, it wasn't. It was no problem to take it out. So just be aware that it is something publishers may or may not discuss with you, but I wouldn't worry about it at this stage in terms of entering pitch wars or searching for an agent. It's not, nobody's going to blink an eye. Just based on my experience, nobody's going to worry too much about it. It's just once you get to actual publication, then the discussion will likely come up.
So I just want to jump in and say that I think it's certainly fine to handle these darker and heavier topics in middle grade. And in fact, it's something that I encourage, because these are real stories that children are living every day. And I think they need to see themselves and their situations on the pages. But what I would encourage you to do if you are writing these heavier stories is to make sure you read really widely in middle grade. There are plenty of authors out there who are doing the heavier stories, who are doing homelessness and drug abuse and pretty much everything you can imagine. Just read widely and look how they do it. It doesn't mean you have to do it exactly the same way, but it'll give you an idea how you can handle these subjects in a sensitive manner and what's appropriate for middle grade.
Yeah, and in addition to that, actually, my agent and I really tried not to put any swearing in the book. But one of the things about my story is that it's based in the Philippines, and it's currently set in the modern time, which is and our president is kind of infamous for being he swears a lot on TV, everywhere. I mean, seriously. But one of the things, and we have to show him in the story, because my story basically revolves around drug and war. Yeah, it's kind of serious. War on drugs. So we kind of need to show the president. So what I did is basically just I made my character describe the president as swearing, but her not really hearing the swears because of the bleeps. So which is kind of what happens anyway when we see him on TV. It's like bleep, 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 bleep. So it's something that one thing that you can also try is that try using bleeps. And it's kind of one of those stylistic things that you can use when somebody swears, because when you have like adults, especially like with my book, it's set in the Philippines. I'm sorry, but I kind of grew up with my dad bleeping all the way. all throughout my childhood, my mom, my dad, my uncles, just, you know, they just do that, you know. And unfortunately, it's part of the culture, and it's something that if I kind of take out of the story, it's kind of not gonna make it that genuine. And so we kind of just, you know, just put it in because you're gonna put the president. You can't take the swearing out, so you put the beeps in. So it's just really up to you to you know, find ways to actually do those swearing without actually swearing. So you're writers, you're very creative, and I trust that you can do your job to like present swearing in the most creative manner as you can. So there.
Awesome, guys. This is like golden advice. People like pay big bucks for webinars to learn the secrets of middle grade. So I hope you guys are enjoying yourselves. I know I am. We did just reach the halfway mark, which means it's time to talk about Writer's Life apparel. If you have not checked them out, please go check out your awesome Pitch War swag. This is last year's design, but you can still get them. And then here's the other Pitch Wars mug. Beautiful. Love it. And there's so many other cool designs, and the proceeds to Pitch War swag from Writer's Life apparel goes towards amping up the stuff we do for you guys. Like, you know, we're doing webinars and the forum, so make sure you check them out. Okay, we're going to switch now to submission advice. Our first question comes from Monty Harper. Besides a story pitch, what do you want to see in a good query? While we talk about this one, let's also talk about pet peeves that we get in our submissions for the opening pages and queries too. So something good about queries, and then things to avoid. And let's all answer that, starting with CB.
Well, I want to get to know your characters in the queries, but I don't want you to tell me your whole story. I've found when I was an intern, sometimes queries would lean more towards synopsis style writing. And so if you can, you know, follow that little formula of, you know, who your MC is, who your antagonist is, and what they must do to fulfill their goal. You know, if this happens, then your MC must do this or else. And so I really like when, you know, it's broken up into 3 really good solid paragraphs of telling me exactly, and tease me a little bit. Don't tell me everything. You know, don't make it so vague that I have no idea, or give me 100 different names of each city that your main character may go through. But make me want to jump to your pages right away. And then, what was the second part of the question?
So things that make a good query, and then pet peeves in your opening, like chapter and query.
I guess pet peeves would be in the opening chapters would probably be too much background right away, or too much backstory. If you're telling me about something that happened 5 years ago and you're not starting right when the story's taking place, then I tend to get bored really fast. I love prologues, and so I know that sometimes that's a no-no right now. But if you've got that kind of stuff, maybe write a prologue and put it away and save it for later for when your book gets bought, and you might be able to convince your editor to put it in. But, you know, start in the now. It doesn't have to be some crazy big action. But you know, I want to find out what's happening today, not 10 years ago.
So me, not really. If you're subbing to us, to me and Isabel, we're not really that fussed about the query, but because we know it's one of the things that we're gonna be working with you. It's your query, but I'm actually more on the pages, and if the pages are going to capture us or not. But if we're gonna be specific about the query, I think I'd say the best thing I need to see is the stakes. I need to know that your character has more or less what your character has to lose if he doesn't do this or that. So I need to see basically if you have like conflict in the story. But if you can show that, probably, you know, if your voice captures us just fine, we'll probably request anyway. But that's one of the things that you can like take note of, it, even when you're querying agents, is that you need to make sure that your query not only has your character, but it also has the stakes. Yeah, that's it. And pet peeves, that's the second part of the question, right? Sorry, kind of lost track. Yeah, right. So, all right, my pet peeves when it comes to the opening, I really hate, I kind of, pages that kind of lose me are those that start like this. Hi, I'm Gail. I have a duck. My duck is Sunday. Basically, you know, like the introductory type of thing. It kind of bores me. And so, if you're gonna like introduce your character, I'd rather that you do it organically and not like straight out in your face. This is Gail. So that's me. And then when it comes to pet peeves in the query, and this is something I kind of notice other agents also. Sorry. Yes, pet peeve also. What's a pet peeve? So his pet peeve and mine and Isabel's is that you kind of don't need to tell us too much about your bio, like 2 lines would do. That doesn't necessarily have to be your life story, because I need to know about the story and not so much about you at that point. I need to be to be captivated by what you have instead of who you are, and then from there we go. You know, we go deeper if we can actually work with you, and most likely if we like your voice, we're gonna do everything that we can to work together. So that's that, and that's Sunday's pet peeve. It doesn't like bio, so remember that. It doesn't like bio. That's too long because he gets bored. So that's us. All right, thank you, Sunday.
Same as what Gail and CB said. I think queries, you know, just have your main character and have the main conflict mentioned, and really show strong high stakes at the end. The stakes are so important because, I mean, it is just a short little pitch for your book. So the stakes show us where we are headed in your book without having to give like an in-depth, this happens and this happens like you would in a synopsis. So that's really nice, you know, making sure that you have the stake sentence at the end. But overall, I'm not too concerned with queries, partly because I will shamelessly say, like, I love writing and rewriting queries, so they're really easy to fix. So even if the query that you send us is, you know, messy, and it's not as good as your book is, that's okay, because we can fix that. So, you know, focus on your pages, focus on your actual manuscript, because the query is very easy for us to fix. We will fix it and make it amazing. But as for your pages, same thing I think as what CB said, telling and info dumps. We don't need a lot of time telling backstory. I guarantee that you can take it out and your chapter will be much stronger. Keep us in the moment, keep us in active sentences that keep everything moving forward. I think that's the most important part of your first chapter, is keeping that momentum going. Did I answer everything? Did I miss something?
Okay, I think in terms of the query, Juliana really covered it all. I mean, the most important thing is that you introduce us to the character, you give us the conflict, and then you give us the stakes. So just to tack on a little bit more about the stakes, I think a lot of times writers don't understand why they're so important, but you can tell us all you want about the character or about the plot or the conflict. If we don't know what the stakes are, then we don't know why any of that matters, and we don't care about any of it. So it's a really important part of the query that I think often gets misunderstood, overlooked, or left off. I would also say in the query, keep it succinct, because especially in pitch wars, most of us are going to go ahead and check out your pages anyway. So as Juliana said, we're not concerned about the query so much as we are just getting a brief overview of the story and moving on to the pages. In terms of opening chapters and pet peeves, I think at this point in the game, Julie and I are looking for a mentee who has done their homework. So one of my big pet peeves for pitch wars, because there is so much information available on the feed and it's such a strong community and there's so much information available online, is when a writer hasn't done their homework. So if I see dream sequence openings, or if I see an opening that has the character looking in the mirror as a method to identify what they look like, then I know that the writer probably hasn't really put in the time they need to master the craft, because those are pretty basic things that I would expect a writer who's ready to be agented to know by now. I think that's about it for me.
I was going to say exactly the same thing as Jessica. I think all of the mentors are going to read your pages, whether or not your query letter is a garbage can fire or not. It's really okay. So, you know, that's not the thing to put your time and energy into. Of course, you want to be professional, but really we care about your pages. So always put, if you have limited time, always put your time into that first. And just to have caution a little bit about, you know, too much backstory or that sort of thing. On the flip side is too much action or dialogue without context. If I have a whole chapter with a whole bunch of exciting things happening and I have no idea who anybody is or why I should care, I can't connect to something like that. So there is a balance in text and having some kind of context, which isn't the same thing as backstory or anything, but context, and then not too much action happening so quickly that I don't have a chance to care. And also to follow up on the research, you know, I received some submissions in the past that were 20, 25. I received one that was 50 pages. That's not a first chapter. And so even though I only read to the first 10 pages, when I open up the document file, I see how many pages it is, and I have a knee-jerk reaction like, ugh, you know, that's it. that's my knee-jerk reaction. And so I did go ahead and read the first 10 pages for all of those people and write a note about following guidelines and that sort of thing. But I will just say now that it definitely starts you on the wrong foot.
All right, I think everyone's saying, you know, really great things. To go along with the stakes thing, one of my pet peeves in queries is when you put in the stakes, but they're not specific. So you're saying, my character is going to risk everything or the world will end, or, you know, things like that. Like, I want to know specifically what your character will lose or specifically what they will gain and you know, what happens to their world. I hope that makes sense. And as far as opening pages, a big turnoff for me is a lot of typos. I feel like your first chapter is your strongest chapter. You're going to be working on it the most. So if there's a lot of typos or grammatical errors, I'm going to assume the rest of the manuscript has even more. And I'm going to wonder, you know, how much time will need to be spent on it. Not saying your manuscript has to be perfect. Again, that's what we're here for. But this is going to be something we need to know that you've tried to work on, and it's not a first draft that nobody has ever seen before. So.
For queries, what I would add to all of that great advice is the voice of the query should match the voice of the book. So what I tell people that I've worked with on queries is your query is making a promise that your manuscript should then deliver on in terms of all aspects, but especially voice. So that if somebody reads like a humorous kind of quirky query and then they open the first chapter, it's like all dark and creepy and stuff like that, the two don't match, and it's kind of, it throws the reader off kilter. So inject narrative voice into your query. In a synopsis, you usually don't, but in a query, you should. In terms of pet peeves, I guess the one thing I would mention, in addition to what everybody else has said, is I see a lot of wasted first lines. Sometimes I hear people say, you know, well, the story doesn't really get started to page 2 or whatever like that. No, your first line absolutely has to grab. Your first sentence, your first paragraph, your first page, it's got to grab the reader's attention. You can lose a reader in the first line. And if you don't know what I mean by that, the best advice I can give you is go check out top selling middle grade books from the past couple of years. Jump onto Amazon. Usually you can find the first page. Read the first line of his, like go read 100 first lines of really well selling middle grade books, and then you'll have an idea of what I mean by a first line that really grabs the reader's attention. It's very important.
Awesome. So we got a fun question. Not that the other questions weren't fun. These are all great questions, everyone. This is from Susan Burdorf. What is your favorite phrase to use with your mentee when you are excited about something they wrote? So let's have a round of Pitch Wars Mentor catchphrases. Let's all do this and just keep it short and brief, and we'll start with CB again.
I've never had a mentee before, so I don't know what I'll use, but if I'm really excited, I might take something from LSP and say, oh my glob. So yeah, I'll go with that right now.
Me, I think the phrase I used frequently was like, this is awesome, because it actually was. Especially those grabby like one-liners, you can just say wow. So probably wow. Yeah, that's shorter, so let's go with wow.
So definitely not middle grade, but if I'm super excited about stuff, I will tend to swear a lot in my comments about how awesome things are, which if you don't like that, I will totally tone it down for you. Don't worry. But yes, if I'm super excited about something, I will, yeah, bleep.
And I completely go the opposite direction. The parts that I love in the books, those sentences that really jump out, I go to all caps and just write love with a million exclamation points behind it. And then at some point, I have to write a note that I will never get through the actual manuscript if I keep doing that. And so I can't really stop myself, because there are usually so many places that I love that the entire manuscript is littered with love, 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 love all over it.
I use love and nice a lot as well. And I have caught myself, I only lived in the Midwest until I was about 8, but I feel like my Minnesota comes out more when I'm really excited, and I say, oh my gosh, a lot. So that's what you'll get.
Yeah, I'm the same way when I'm going through the manuscript. It's all hearts or smiley faces. I do a lot of ha-has in everything I do, and that usually means a good thing. Oh my goodness, I say a lot. Maybe after tonight, I'll just take on the bleepity bleep bleep. This is so exciting. I think that's my new thing now.
I'm like Tara. I use ha a lot with an exclamation mark and other exclamation marks, or sometimes just smiley face. That's about, I'm pretty low key. So if you get a smiley face or one exclamation point, that's a big deal from me. That's
Awesome. I'm a big love person too, and it takes me forever because there's just so much to love. You all are great writers. We definitely have existential crises trying to choose you. Here's a question from Tammy Gabo. I apologize. How many characters are too many in middle grade for you? Does anyone have any opinions on middle grade soup when it comes to character numbers? Wade, take us away.
Yeah, I'll jump back in. I won't say necessarily in terms of my personal opinion, but just by way of anecdote, when I submitted my first manuscript, when we went on submission, it had, I want to say, on the order of about 24 characters that were, more than just kind of flitting in and out, and we cut that by half. So the final version with the publisher working with my editor, we cut it down. So, if you've got, I'd say up to a handful of maybe main characters, you're probably okay, and then that many more secondary characters. If you're beyond that, you're probably getting a lot from middle grade. I never want to say you can't do it, because there's always going to be an outlying example or a few examples out there, but I guess the question is, if it's your first book and you're on submission, you want to give yourself the best chance possible. So sometimes I cut out a number of characters that I absolutely love, but sometimes that's just what you have to do. So 8 to 10, 12, maybe, you're probably all right in terms of total characters that the reader needs to keep track of. More than that, make sure they're really essential, would be my advice.
Yeah, actually more on that, try to keep it within the 10 to 12 range, because that was actually one of my problems with my first manuscript. So they actually have all our problems in the first manuscript, right? It's a learning novel. So anyway, that's one of the things that I had to cut, because sometimes we get too attached to certain characters, right? And we don't really see how they're like really contributing to the story. And that's one of the things that you have to remember when you're putting in characters, because when you have too much, it's hard to keep track. You need to remember names. You need to make sure that they don't have the same. One of the things I try to avoid is making sure that they have different beginning letters of their name, because sometimes you can get confused. Like, especially in Filipino names, you have like Tina, Tino, and Tonying, and you have like so similar sounding names, and that can actually contribute to the confusion of your reader. So when you're like when you're like when you're like trying to cut down your characters, you need to remember which ones you can combine, and sometimes combining them would actually give your character more depth, and it's gonna like sometimes if you like combine a bad guy and a good guy, and then the combination of them the resulting character is actually much more 3D and much more believable than they would have been had they been separate characters. So that's one of the things that you can remember when you're like trying to cut down characters, because I totally get it. So hard to cut characters because sometimes you just get so attached to them. But it's really essential to keep it within the 10 to 12 range, so it's still manageable. Sorry.
I'm just going to jump in and follow up on what Gail just said in terms of cutting characters and combining characters. I think when you're looking at this question, one of the questions to ask is, what are you trying to accomplish with this character? And oftentimes when you ask that question, you find that this character really doesn't have a place in the story, or if they do have a place in the story and they need to move the story forward, there's often another character that can do that instead, or there's a way you can combine the characters so that one character can accomplish several different things in the story. So that's just a quick tip for how to figure out what characters are necessary and what to do if you do need to combine or cut characters.
Now, I'm not a middle grade mentor, but I was a mentee in YA in 2014, and I just wanted to jump in and say that I had 2 characters that got cut from my book and absorbed by other characters, because, I mean, it's a very real thing about, too many people, and sometimes it really adds depth to characters when they get absorbed. So, for example, my main character had a best friend and an enemy, and they became the same person in the book, and it made it so much better. Okay, so we're coming up on the end of the hour. Last question, guys. What is your one piece of advice you would like to give a writer trying to make it? And let's start with Rebecca.
I think my one piece of advice is threefold. I'm cheating, but it's very short. Have critique partners, listen to them, and persevere. Perseverance is a big part of the game in publishing. So that's it.
I like Rebecca's, so I'm going to second hers and say practice makes perfect, or as perfect as you can be. They always say put in your million words or whatever. So keep practicing and you will continue to get better, and it'll show.
Seconding all of that, the piece of advice that I typically give is, if I can only give one piece, is be willing to revise. And I really mean that, like, be willing to re-envision how you're telling your story, the characters involved in the story, the way that the plot's going, all of that. At least be willing to rethink it, because we can all be pretty stubborn once we've got words on paper about what we're willing to change and not, and just the willingness, the openness to at least rethinking it in a different way has, for me, been the most beneficial in terms of my own journey towards publication.
I also second everything that's been said before me. I guess to add to that, I would say just breathe. I know there's going to be times when you get so stressed and you want to throw your laptop or rip up your pages or run away screaming like you're on fire. Just breathe and know that, you know, in the end, you're doing this for yourself. You want it to be enjoyable. And if you can't enjoy what you are doing, then you need to step away, take a break, and then come back. And also surround yourself with other writer friends, because they are invaluable. The people who you meet through pitch wars or whatever means, you know, local writing groups, someone who lives thousands and thousands of miles away, they can help you when you're stuck, and they can be your support group. And that's definitely something we all need through the times when our words make us want to scream. So yeah, that's my advice.
Well, me, actually, the advice I'm going to give you is the same one that my own mentor, Kate Messner, gave me, is that learn how to listen to critique, because every step of the way, as you go along, like, as you go further along your publishing journey, you're going to encounter critique a lot. So I totally get that as writers, we can be really sensitive about our work, but you know, sometimes it helps to learn to just step back and you know, listen to what people are saying, and you know, maybe determine if when you have a clear head already, that's the time when you determine if this kind of critique is something that will make your story better. And aside from that, everybody, like everybody said, yeah, find critique partners, write a lot, read a lot, and you know, that's it.
So mine is super similar, but find your people, and not just that. I mean, yes, your people are your net. I mean, like, I sent an email out to my best writing friend yesterday saying, I am completely hopeless about the blah, blah, blah that I'm working on. And she said exactly what I needed to hear. So, I mean, find your people so that they can do that. But at the same time, make sure that those people are also people whose opinion you highly respect in terms of writing and critique and revisions, and that they are people who push you and people who are not hesitant to say that, look, this plot is not working. You need to figure out how to shift it around or change it. That they are people who are not afraid to give you hard critique and push you, because that, I mean, that is the reason why I have grown as a writer. Not just for my own, you know, pushing myself, but that my friends have done so, and that we've pushed each other over the years of writing. So find yourself a good safety net, but a safety net that is not afraid to make you a better writer.
I would say that it's really important to try your best not to compare yourself to everybody else, and recognize that we all have our own paths. I know some of you have heard this before, but for those of you who haven't, I actually entered Pitch Wars a few years ago myself, and I didn't get chosen. And like many of you, I was completely devastated and took it as a sign of my self-worth and the merit of my story. And the very next day, I got a call offering representation from my agent. So Pitch Wars is fantastic, and I love Pitch Wars. I love the community. It's so important and so valuable, but it doesn't define you, and it doesn't define your writing. So just keep following your own path and your own journey, and know that as long as you never get up, someday you'll succeed.
Thank you, guys. I don't know if you all saw this, but everyone's like nodding as everyone's talking, because this advice is gold. And I mean, the Pitch Wars community has helped me a lot in my own writer journey, and I really hope that we can help yours. Thank you so much for tuning in and asking your questions. If we didn't get to your question, we will go on Twitter and try to answer some, and other mentors might hop on that too. Thank you again to the wonderful mentors tonight, and to our amazing Twitter captain, Limar. Thank you, guys, and have a great night. May the pitch be in your favor.